Hi, this is Manjula Narayan, books editor, Hindustan Times, and today I have with me Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Hello.
Hi Manjula, good to see you.
And we're going to talk about his new book, The Hindu Way, An Introduction to Hinduism. So, why this book and why now?
Why now? You've got to ask the publishers. They're the ones who are insistent. What happened was, when I published a couple of years ago my book, Why I'm a Hindu, though it was my statement of my Hinduism, it was also fairly political because there's a whole section that analyzed Hindutva, and there was a fair bit on contemporary Indian politics in which the uses and misuses of Hindu faith and religion were particularly focused upon. And that, I must say, was my message. That's what I wanted to write. But it cost the publisher some readers. Let's be very blunt. There were people who said, we love the stuff on Hinduism, but we don't like his politics, or we don't agree with him on BJP and Hindutva and so on. So, therefore, we can't buy this book for our grandchildren. This kind of stuff.
Really?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I actually met a lady at a party once and had an almost conversation like that. She said, I had read 100 pages. I loved your book so much. I bought a dozen copies for my family. And they all came back to me and said, Grandmother, what are you doing? This guy hates the BJP. He's anti-Hindutva, etc. So I said, yeah, I am. She said, then why did you spoil it? Because your stuff on Hinduism, I really wanted my children to know. That was the kind of reaction. So my publisher said, why don't we do? In fact, I initially thought they meant a kind of coffee table book full of illustrations. And this is full of illustrations, about 100 illustrations in the book. And it's meant to be something that really these grandmothers can give to their deracinated NRI kids who ask basic questions about caste and reincarnation, why so many gods, all the stuff. Everything is answered, but in a very personal, this is my Hinduism. And as I say, every one of us is entitled to our own Hinduism. That's the great beauty of the religion. So to my mind, that's what this is. It's not... the word Hindutva doesn't occur in it as far as I remember.
It does.
It does, all right, here and
There's
there.
a whole section, actually, that's the best section, I thought.
But you see,
where you talk about the difference between Hindutva and Hinduism.
Only to make the point that Hinduism is a liberal and inclusive religion. I don't go at all, for example, as I did in the other book, into the doctrines of Savarkar, Golwalkar, Deen Dayal Upadhyay, the political use of it in the BJP and in the Ram Janmabhoomi movement and all of that. That whole stuff is out. Because we didn't want this to be a book about politics. We wanted it to be a book that lays out a view of Hinduism, which is entirely sustainable from the scriptures and everything else, but at the same time is very much a liberal, if you like, even a 21st century faith for our times.
Okay, but this, books on Hinduism have suddenly become very fashionable right now.
And some are accusing me of having started the fashion a couple of years ago.
So, and I just spoke to, Shapan Das Gupta a couple of months
Bharat
ago.
Mata.
Yes. And while flipping through this, I thought that both of you were coming, especially, the approach towards Vivekanand and all that. Both of you are coming to the same subject, but from completely different angles. So, if you can talk about.
Well, I just think that the main difference between many of the Hindutvawadis and me is that I've actually read the stuff I'm talking about. Vivekanand did most of his writing and preaching in English. And therefore, I can actually say I have some knowledge of the primary sources. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a Sanskritist. I'm not somebody who can claim to be able to quote Sanskrit shlokas like my friend Dr. Karan Singh, who will, at the drop of a hat, quote whole chunks of Sanskrit verse from memory. I can't do any of that stuff. I have read my Hinduism in English, and I have studied Hinduism as an amateur, not as a student of religion. I've studied it through English, and I've discovered Hinduism through the lived experience of a sort of expatriate Malayali kid growing up in Bombay, Calcutta, and Delhi, but going on pilgrimages with his family, talking to his parents, witnessing the faith in its many manifestations, seeing the differences in North and South, and many other East and West for that matter, and seeing how eclectic and wide-ranging our faith is, and really loving the faith for that. I really enjoy the fact that we don't have a pope to lay down the law. We don't have imams who can issue fatwas telling us what to do, how to dress, where to live, how to eat, etc. We don't even have any specific requirements. It always amuses me when Christians revere the idea of Sunday, or Jews the Saturday, or Muslims the Friday. And I think the great thing for a Hindu is you can actually choose any day of the week depending on which particular god you want to consecrate your devotions to. So my late wife would fast on Mondays for Shivji. Somebody else, heavily into Hanuman, somebody else into Ganesh. They all have different days of the week that they can pick for that purpose. So that's assigned to a particular god for that purpose. And it's not even a god we use
Yes.
shorthand to help people understand, but it's actually a manifestation of the divine. That's what, when you call God with a small g, if you like, that's what it is. Because ultimately, amongst the things that I found immensely congenial about Hinduism is its very sensible approach to things like imagining God, right? None of us has seen God. None of us knows what God looks like. So we are free in Hinduism to imagine the divine in absolutely one of 333 million possible ways. But everything ultimately is manifestations of this idea of Brahman, this universal spirit that suffuses the cosmos and all creation.
Okay. Now, a lot of, in the contemporary setting, a lot of people say who are non-Hindu, immediately bring up the caste system. And you have tackled that quite well, I thought, in the book. So, let's look at that,
So, I mean, obviously, like many modern Hindus, I have a real problem with the idea of any differentiation based on pure birth. I try and draw a distinction between Hinduism as social practice and Hinduism as faith, but I ultimately end up taking refuge in the absence of compulsory obligations. I don't accept the idea that to be a Hindu you have to practice caste discrimination. And many, many good Hindus, including Mahatma Gandhi, also did not believe in that idea. And I believe that there's enough sanctity in the Hindu scriptures to permit me not to believe in that idea or not to believe in any other idea. I mean, look, in our country, if somebody says, I'm a good Hindu because I worship Ram, I read the Hanuman Chalisa, I do Sita Puja, and somebody else says, I don't do any of those things and I'm still a very good Hindu, they're both right. And neither has the right to tell the other guy, you're wrong because mine's a better Hinduism than yours. I mean, there was a time when Shaivites and Vaishnavites practically considered themselves separate religions. But the truth is that they're all essentially manifestations of the same sort of philosophical, metaphysical yearning to reach out to something much, much beyond us, but which is relevant to all our lives on this planet. That is the central idea. So caste, as I said in my book, the one thing that troubled me was the social misuse of caste. But the moment you start saying, look, I'm a Brahmin because I was a good guy in my previous life, and you are either suffering this unspeakable illness or you are condemned to cleaning manual waste or whatever because of something that some previous birth did that you don't even know about or can't remember today, but you therefore have to play that role and you better accept your lot. That kind of misuse of caste for social conformity, to my mind, has nothing to do with the theology of the faith and is not something that I am comfortable with in any case. I am a profound believer in the idea that you judge people by what they do, who they are, the content of their character, and not by the accident of their birth. And that indeed, given opportunity, most people can rise above the circumstances of their birth and make something very different of themselves. Whereas the big flaw of caste is its tendency to pigeonhole people in a particular box. So that was interesting. Now, of course, my parents were from the national generation. My father gave up his caste surname in college because Mahatma Gandhi had said that one shouldn't be promoting one's caste and so on. And so he ended up in England reversing his family name, which in my community is the mother's family name actually, and making that his surname in the Western or North Indian sense.
It's pretty common in Kerala.
Yeah, exactly. So that happened to all of us. Yeah. But anyway, the thing is that their response to all of this was just to pretend it didn't exist. So they never even told me my caste until I was, forced to go and ask them because somebody was asking me what my caste was.
Rishi Kapoor.
Yeah, that's the story.
Whose name you don't mention, though you talk about the whole incident.
Well, I didn't want to create a needless, Twitter controversy. Actually, when I first wrote about this incident many years ago, more than 20 years ago, I mentioned his name. There's no embarrassment. And I think somebody even asked him about it and he laughed and he said, maybe this must have happened or whatever. People didn't take it. But now when everything becomes a controversy, I thought, let me not drag somebody else into a controversy. So I didn't name him now. But the truth is that that attitude was very typical of that nationalist generation. I mean, my father would have turned 18 a few months after independence. So, I mean, that's the generation that he came from. And so I was brought up to be oblivious to caste. And I write in the book about how it was really only after coming back quite late in life to live in India and writing about caste as something that didn't matter, shouldn't matter, etc., that I got this massive pushback from a few Dalit bloggers, and one particular who said she was an 18-year-old girl, wrote pointing out that to be oblivious of caste is an affectation of the privileged. Yes. then it's because you never had to suffer because of your caste
That's a
origins.
good paragraph.
Yeah,
actually.
and she says essentially because you never had to suffer, you can afford to ignore caste. What about those of us who have no choice but to live with caste on the day we are born? And that shook me a bit, and I realized that she had made me think about um, caste not merely as something to be ignored and left out of my life, but as something to actively be fought against and
To
criticized.
look at your own privilege.
Yeah.
Who is a Hindu? I mean, you dealt with that, but who is a Hindu really?
My short answer is it makes sense, and it makes sense to most people who've studied Hinduism as a faith, to think of it as one with multiple forms and diversities and variants, rather than, as some very speciously have argued, to say that this is actually multiple different beliefs and faiths that have been inaccurately clubbed together in one way. That's not really true.
Okay, and finally, that question that your Danish boss asked about
Why should a Hindu be good?
yeah, why should a Hindu be good?
To my mind, the answer to that is a Hindu should be good not only because of his faith in reincarnation, which is a different issue, because as I say, that doesn't necessarily guide your present context, but because of the Hindu's faith in Dharma, that we must in life do the right thing and do the thing right. That we have this commitment enjoined upon us to live according to the dictates of what is right. In fact, when I wrote the great Indian novel, now 30 years ago, it was a Muslim friend of mine who, looking at my explanatory note on Dharma, which ends the book, after the novel is over, I have a couple of glossaries and notes, and I've got one on Dharma saying how untranslatable Dharma is. And he said, look, here's a simple translation of Dharma. And he's a Muslim. He said, that by which we live. And I thought about it. It's really more that by which we should live. But yes, that's all your Dharma is. And born as a Hindu, brought up in a Hindu household, you're enjoined to follow your Dharma. And one of the great things about that is that our philosophy teaches us to do the right thing always, even if there is no reward for it. The Bhagavad Gita's great teaching that you function without expectation of reward demands a lot of human beings. It's certainly impossible, say, in Protestant Christianity, where the reward is very much all, where capitalism thrived in an environment in which people were able to be both good Christians and ruthlessly efficient capitalists working for profit. Whereas the Hindu is basically told, if you're doing the right thing, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, whether you gain or suffer. And again, even suffering. Hinduism has this perfect answer that God is everywhere. God is there in your pain. God is there in your joy. God is not sort of some guy in the mountains with a white beard who's casting boons on you and has chosen not to favor you because you did something bad yesterday. That's not the Hindu idea of God. And therefore, this whole notion that Dharma suffuses your life and you're going to go on that way, that to my mind is why Hindu should be good.
Okay. And also, you've spoken about the assault of Hindutva on Hinduism. You talk about that. And how...
Well, as I said, this book is not meant to be all that political. It's mainly a statement of my faith. And therefore, I don't really want to spend a lot of time on that. I just make a description of my faith to make it clear that it has nothing in common with the intolerance, the bigotry, the prejudices, and the narrow-mindedness that some...
But you do think that...
in the Hindutva
you do think that,
movement.
like a lot of us do, that the Hindutva movement itself is not very Hindu.
It's not.
In
It's
its
actually
essence.
anti-Hindu. The Hindutva movement is anti-Hindu in that it rejects all the premises of Hinduism I've described. It rejects Vivekananda's fundamental notion of the acceptance of difference, both within the faith and with other faiths. It rejects the entire notion of multiple forms and diversities of worship, behavior, and practice. We just saw a few days ago, last week in Germany, when there was this Indian food fair kind of thing organized by the
Yes,
consulate.
this beef thing.
And the Kerala Samajam, in all innocence, coming up with a number of Malayali dishes, came up with a favorite Malayali dish, parota and beef fry. And the VHP and Hindutva elements descended on them, on the consulate, saying, this is not Indian culture, take it away, etc. Now, who gave them the right to define what is Indian culture? I mean, I'm ashamed of the consulate for having caved in. because they really surrendered in the most abject and humiliating way. And they betrayed Indian culture, which is actually a culture that embraces difference. These people should have been told that your own minister, Kiran Rijiju from Arunachal, in a famous statement said, no one can come between me and my beef. Because he's a BJP man, but he's from a part of the country where it's part of his culture. That should be India. Instead, unfortunately, we have these characters who have this very narrow-minded, bigoted view. They have succeeded in reducing...
It's a very mainstream North Indian view.
Yeah, but they've succeeded in reducing the soaring majesty of the Upanishads, the soaring majesty of the metaphysical inquiries you and I have just been talking about, into something much more like the team identity of the British football hooligan. You know, my team is better than your team. My team involves doing all this. I'll hit you on the head if you disagree with me. I mean, that's not Hinduism. That simply is not Hinduism. It involves neither satya nor ahimsa, nor respect for other faiths. What is this that they're trying to claim is Hindutva? It's not. It is actually anti-Hinduism. Okay. And in fact, it's interesting that as a new biography of Savarkar points out, that even the man who invented the term Hindutva did not agree with half the things that these people are saying.
That's true. That is true.
Including bashing up people in the name of cow vigilantism and so on. He'd have been horrified.
Okay, and on that, we'll end. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Go out and get this book. It's very interesting.